All right, we're going to continue with labeling homosexuality, part 3. And this one, we're looking at lesbian women, and we're looking primarily at a marriage between two women. Let's see. Women are together. One must play the masculine role, so we're back to that item that was addressed in prior screencasts. The heterosexual paradigm, they bring up that item. One must play the man, and the other one has to play the woman. The passive woman would be the victim of the sexual advances, which is kind of where we were when we were looking at the the different relationships, trying to figure out which of the two would be the invert, the homosexual, or the victim. All right, here we have some Herbert Claiborne, again, inverts. So again, remember we started with Carl Ulrich, and we see Ulrich's work really playing a role in influencing a lot of other individuals, and in this case, Herbert Claiborne. Here we bring up the phrase hermaphrodites. So here we see in here the definition for a hermaphrodite, which seems to be more of a biological explanation here. Incorporating biological elements of both sex. They have structural elements of the opposite sex. So now they have structural elements. Okay, what would that look like? So in this case, a sign of masculinity and perversion in women. And some of these theories, get interesting. And the evidence here is that bearded women are masculine, and 68% of 181 were not married. So that's the evidence. So here, when they're talking about the structural elements of the opposite sex, one of those structural elements could simply be the beard, and that could be something that is going to, um, put you in a certain category. And in this case, you're going to be, a hermaphrodite for this item here. Something as simple as you have a beard, you're not married, counts. Let's move on with our theory. All right, linking lesbians to biology. Okay, early 1900s. Now it gets even more interesting. You have to bring up the menstrual cycle. Now we're looking at the biology of woman, examining her menstrual cycle. And here becomes the evidence. At an early age, they stop menstruating, and they have irregular periods. So this seems to be a biological explanation, and it seems to be using the menstrual cycle. You stop menstruating at an early age, I guess the argument is you are a lesbian. That makes you less of a woman, is where they're going with this, according to society. Richard von Croft, his degeneration theory. This one seems to be concerned about the preservation of a society. Degeneration theory. The argument is that man, man, woman, woman is going to lead to a decline of society. Notice how they seem to be concerned about marriage, lower evolution, and threatens the civilization. So this is actually a negative with regard to the explanation here, but the threat is that homosexuals are going to lead to a decline of civilization. That's what I want you to take from this one. Let's move on here. This is a challenge to this. So here we see John Paddington. If you're going to argue that it's going to lead to a decline of society, then what would that say about the Greek civilization, where you have homosexuality playing a role? If you believe that Greek civilization was a high civilization, high society, then there goes your degeneration theory. So this individual is challenging the degeneration theory, which is why I included that one. To give you an idea of how far degeneration theory would go, and put a date in there, we see some influence in the Nazi Party. So if you're wondering, well, how did the Nazis view homosexuality? Don't quite know the answer to that. They seem to be in the middle. And what you're looking at here is a study from the book called The Racial State, where they cite evidence of Nazi, experiments on homosexuals. One of the things the Nazis would do was to give testosterone to gay men. And in this particular study, what you're looking at here are dates. And the doctor in this case is simply going in at these stated times and is looking at the male's penis and trying to make a determination about the, the erection point. Anyway, so this basically boils down to we're going to have a doctor, and the doctor is going to walk into the room and is pretty much just taking note of the individual. And notice how the Nazis seem to be using a study that is about trying to make gay men not gay, homosexual, by using testosterone. So if they're using testosterone, that seems to be more of a biological. It seems to be out of this individual's control. Maybe they're just deficient, which is the reason why they're going in and they're looking at whether or not this individual has an erection or not. Here they're talking about an artificial male hormonal gland, and then they're going in and looking at the individual's penis. That's what's going on there. Sexual deviancy, not homosexuality. You want to take note of the language sexual deviancy, because this is going to be a phrase that is going to plague gay men in America, especially during the 50s. Sexual deviancy, is it something of a working class issue, or is it part of the upper class? Is there something called good moral sex? Good moral sex would be woman and man getting married, having children, being in an institution of marriage, and so on. They also look at evidence in this particular study about servants showing kids how to masturbate. So this is a class issue, because let's just say in this wealthy family of the upper class, we now have a servant. The servant is the one that is showing this individual everything that they need to know about sexuality, sexual deviant. So this individual is the sexual deviant, and this individual is trying to corrupt this individual. Deviancy is class-based. When we look at the next image, we see methods to stop. So if you agree that sexual deviancy is a no-no, that's something that we're not going to want within the society. Society in the United States does go through some extreme measures to try to deal with sexual deviancy. And a woman who has a child who is dealing with her son, who is questioning his male reproductive organ, you might want to be able to stop him from touching his male reproductive organ by using a clothespin, because they're associating the touching of the male reproductive organ by the male in question. They're associating that with sexual deviancy. Why does any of this matter? Sexual deviancy is a term that is going to be used. It could be for chronic masturbation. It could be used for somebody exposing himself. It could be for somebody who is a pedophile. And sadly, it would also be something to label homosexuals. All of these individuals represent sexual deviant behavior. They could possibly find themselves at a Tescadero where they're going through shock therapy to try to make these individuals no longer interested in this sexual deviant behavior. And this is primarily one of the things that comes up repeatedly in the Mattachine Society's One magazine that we will look at a later day in class. Prostitutes. Prostitutes also come up in the argument here. And the issue is, if the woman is a prostitute and is engaging in a sexual act with her customer, number one, the client is diseased. This individual is sick. The woman is engaging in a sexual act that is not honorable, and she is giving in to this individual. So if this is truly a lesbian, she is only giving in to the sexual advances as a result of the sexual act that is not honorable, and she is also giving into the desire of the client, which means this seems to be less about the biology and more about the environment. So we'll put that under here. Sociological argument. Here we're talking about prostitution. 1900s, back here we're talking about this phrase about the mental disorder. talking about inversion being hereditary. So now they're linking it to the genetics. And if it's linked to the genetics, if it's a mental disorder, that's going to be problematic and will be addressed in a later class. Sigmund Freud, his explanation, suppression of the libido, and looking at that relationship with a mom or dad. When I think about this one, I'm also thinking about the phrase mollycoddle. Seems to be more about the environment, the relationship. If you are a a girl and you are having a relationship with your dad and your dad is showing you some stuff that are manly, that's manly behavior, then that's about the environment. They also are getting into that Oedipus complex that is significant of Freud. What I want you to take from this one is this: the suppression seems to be on the line of something that is in between biological as well as environmental. Women in the 1900s, here we have some more. As I said, you see some of the women engaging in 1920s like woman behavior, the flappers, sexual perversion, again coming up. And this is looking at the changing nature of woman, which is why we started up here with the flappers. The women are starting to change their behavior, and society's question: are they inverts or are they women that are just changing their behavior? And as I said before, if it wasn't for the flappers, they're the ones who are changing the conversation of inversion, because the flappers, for the most part, are viewed as sex objects of that time. An urbanization argument that brings up the issue of urban versus rural America. And here you have, again, the language of sexual perverts congregating together. They know each other, and that is the establishment of a closeted society. Urban America, 1913, George Beard. Homosexuals live in New York City among every class, so that contradicts the other one about classes. You see the term fairies and brownies, derogatory terms. Here we're starting to have the ability to identify individuals, and I think where they're going with this is about urban America. When you have urban America in such high numbers and you have a huge population that knows each other, they're going to start developing norms, patterns of behavior, and understanding, and that is going to help establish things like language, cultural norms, and so on, which is why I brought up that particular reference here. That's it. Your final thoughts. We are finally done with part 3.